Yeah, it's a great point. I was going to ask him that. John Cooper, Ourlads Guide to the NFL Draft. John, sorry we're running a little bit late from a guest previously. You've heard or seen discussion that coaches are leaving college, or it appears as if the uptick in coaches leaving college to the NFL because college has become so damn complicated with NIL and the signing periods and the transfer portal. Have you said or heard that much yourself from where you are?
Well, I've kind of deduced it myself because, I was a former college coach. In talking to college coaches, there's a frustration level with the NIL and all of the things that are going out, NCAA potential rules, proposals that are being made. And, it's a tough way to go. It's almost like you're putting together a junior college team or a JV, or changing every year. You got a different team every year. So it's a tough business, and the other thing is the goal of a lot of coaches is to coach in the NFL. It's not for everyone, but that's that goal. So I think it's just in talking to college coaches, that's kind of what's happening.
Yeah, I would, I'd say, like, for all the people that say, hey, these guys are going to the NFL, like, well, that's the gig, right? I mean, that's a great job. So why not go there?
Yeah, and for sure, and I think that's what a lot of guys would like to do. I have college coaches I talk to would love to get in the NFL. They're trying to get in, but they're satisfied where they're at for now. But for sure, the NIL thing and what's going on in college football is frustrating. And so somebody that's a high-level college coach might be tempted just because of the headaches. But the money's good either way.
No, it is good, better than ever on both sides of it. So the Combine's about to launch. As someone that has studied NFL prospects forever and ever, what are some things that you cannot not do at the Combine that would hurt you?
Well, in your interview, you better be, straight up in terms of what you're saying, and you better not contradict yourself. In terms of that, they want somebody that comes off well. It looks like they're going to be a good teammate. You have to be very careful. And everybody looks at it a little differently because they're going to have a lot of different questions. There's some tests that you're going to do. So I'd say that's the number one thing. If you're a top prospect or a borderline top prospect, you need to come off in those interviews, fairly well. Some teams it doesn't matters more than others, but that's important. And meet expectations. I think that's the key. You need to meet what the expectations are for you.
John, have you gotten into specific team needs yet, or are you still in the evaluating the prospects?
Still evaluating the prospects. We're looking at team needs. You have to in terms of that, but we're not going to put that together until we see free agency, what happens with that. It's pretty obvious with some teams have needs, but they're going to address them in free agency. And, there's a lot of teams that have cap issues they have to deal with. So what their needs are yet to be determined in many cases. There's still a pretty good idea, what some teams need, but we haven't really got down to the nitty-gritty of addressing that just yet.
To that end, if you need an offensive lineman, is this draft, particularly with guard and tackle, pretty deep where you can, if you miss out on one of those guys in the first round, probably find somebody second, third, even fourth round?
Yeah, I think so. I think the tackle room is really good. The offensive tackles are great. The interior linemen, maybe not as much depth, but there's going to be some of these guys that are tackles right now that are going to kick inside and play guard. The centers are not great. Overall, there's a couple of guys that are intriguing in terms of being Norad from Penn State, for example, that could possibly. But and the kid from Oregon is tremendous. He's a really good player. So, yeah, you've got a couple, but other than that, the depth isn't that great at guard or at center. Anyway, the guards, okay. Tackles, you're going to get one.
John, we know that, there's been the term underwear Olympics out there for forever, all the focus that's on the 40-yard dash. He just asked you a question a couple back about what can you not afford to do, but where do you, as a seasoned scout and analyst, what kind of BS do you sort through from the Combine, and what do you really focus in on that you feel like matters when it comes to the draft?
Well, I think for that, one of the comments was made to be by an old-time scout, anybody can look good running around in shorts. And there's truth to that to a degree, but you want to confirm some things that you see on film. If somebody comes in and that's a corner and runs a 4.840, and you were a little suspect about his ability to stay in phase on a deep route, that's going to bother you. And the guy might be the greatest corner in the world in terms of zone concepts and things like that. But if he doesn't have that flat out speed and can run, and you don't see that, that's going to be a red flag. So that's a concern with that position in particular. And you're also looking for guys to stand out in the drills. But it's not going to necessarily make a difference if the guy wasn't a good player. You could be an all-combine guy, as we call him. But, if you're not showing up on film, a great workout is not going to help you. But if you are showing up on film and then have this great workout, then obviously that can vault you up a little bit, or the other way around. You're a great player, but there's some things that don't show up on the workout. Might drop you down a little bit, or it might be the separator between that person and that guy and another guy in terms of where you might slot him in your draft board.
I'll never forget, and I cannot remember the name. It was David Warren, Florida State, a high school football player that we covered out of East Texas. But he had a back problem. And some people knew that, but the medical exam that they do, they'll know things about you that you broke your leg when you were in fourth grade. Is that true?
Yeah, they have a medical report that is very, very thorough with the doctors. They're going to get your medical records, but they're also going to do a physical there. And they're going to find out things, based on that. And that medical report is really critical. That's one of the things that we don't have access to. And the final medical report doesn't come out until after the combine. And the combine is part of that, finding out that information. But, we wonder sometimes that we got a guy up in the middle of the first round or middle of the second round, all of a sudden he's in the fifth round. And we say, ooh, there's something, either a medical report or the report on maybe what he's been doing off field that he shouldn't be, that has dropped that guy way down. So there's things that, none of us have access to, that the teams get a lot of the final reports the week before the draft. So there's occasionally some guys that are going to drop off the radar because of some things that come out there.
John, when it comes to the quarterbacks, I know it seems like today is a day where Drake May's the name that's getting tossed around a lot with criticism and things. I think Merrill Hodge had some comments. Everybody's buzzing about that. And that's going to be the case with a lot of these prospects. But a guy who seems to be, getting some pretty favorable grades, but people have a lot of questions about is J.J. McCarthy, just simply because we haven't seen him have to do maybe some of the things that other quarterbacks had to do because of just the personnel around them. How do you go about taking a look at J.J. McCarthy? Where does your kind of focus lie on what he does well and what maybe is a concern or maybe more of a question mark at this point in his game?
Well, he shows very good leadership. He can command an offense. He makes good reads for the most part within that scheme. And, again, it's a limited scheme, which, quite frankly, all of the college schemes are most of the college schemes, I say, are somewhat limited in terms of how it's going to transfer to the NFL. But, McCarthy can move. He throws a nice ball. It's more of a one-plane throw sometimes, I think. And I'd like to see, some different elevations on some of those passes. But, he's a solid quarterback, and I can understand why a lot of, one of the guys that works with us is really starting to catch fire with him. And, we haven't kind of made the determination yet whether we're going to vault him up ahead of Drake May. And the reality of it is they're going to be pretty close, and it's going to be, who you like. But he's definitely on our radar as a potential first-round quarterback.
John, Texas has two very good defensive tackles in this draft, Byron Murphy and T'Vondre Sweat. T'Vondre Sweat maybe more of the Ted Washington, Vince Wilfork type, maybe more close to Wilfork than Washington. And then Byron Murphy maybe more what you classically see now in the NFL. Where do you have those guys kind of slotted right now?
I think Murphy's a first-round pick. He's one of the – he may be the – it's going to be a debate between him and Newton from Illinois as who's the best defensive tackle in this draft. Right now we like Newton just a little bit better, but I'll tell you what, Murphy is a solid player. He can rush the passer. He's got get off. He's what NFL defensive line coaches are begging for. Give me somebody that can get off the ball and get to the quarterback. And he plays the run. He's solid against the run. He's a really, really good football player. I think one of the questions that I have a little bit, having watched both of these guys a lot, is how good are they going to be without each other? Because Sweat, he eats up a lot of double teams, and because he's a big, tough, strong, physical kid. He's a push the pocket guy. They gave him a little 5 technique work this year, and he can get off a block and escape, and he's not going to chase quarterbacks down across the field, but he's better than a space eater. I mean, he's a really good football player. And we kind of see him on the fringe of that, that high second day pick, right now. There's a lot of people don't like him as much as we do, I think, but we really like him a lot. And we think he's, those two guys are going to be the two of the top 5 defensive tackles in the draft.
So there's the combine, and then eventually there's each school, and like the Big 12 this year is having an NFL media or NFL pro day in Arlington where the Cowboys practice. And then there's also the personal or whatever visits. The teams can have a certain amount of those. Which of those in order are the most important?
Well, the Big 12 thing, is new, in terms of that type of thing. But I think the workouts at the school for these guys, let's say somebody doesn't perform at the combine. He runs that 4.840. Maybe he's injured. Maybe he pulls something and is not able to do his best. Then that workout becomes very important for that guy. Obviously, you got 2 players that aren't going to throw, the 2 quarterbacks, Daniels and Williams, and then you've got Malik Harrison, who's not even going to go to the combine. That's something new to do that. So obviously for those guys, those workouts at the school is going to be really important. So I would say that, some of these guys come in for, like you say, personal visits. And, the thing there is, again, we want to confirm what kind of guy is this? What kind of teammates is he going to be? Is he going to fit into our building? Those things are important because you really don't know for sure until you get him in the building and they sign that contract. You just don't know 100%. But you want to get the best possible read on it you can. Especially if you're going to, put a first-round draft pick on somebody and you're going to spend that money. You want to make sure you've got somebody that checks all the boxes.
Michael Pennock, do you learn more about him against Oregon, against Texas when he was unbelievable, or do you learn more about him when things did not go well against Michigan?
Well, things didn't go that well against Michigan, but he's still a solid player. He can do things on platform and he can take off and run. He's not perfect. He's in our opinion, more the second tier of that group of quarterbacks. After the top 3 or 4 or 5, both Pennock and he are very close. And, somebody might jump up in the first round and take either one of those guys. Pennock's, his biggest issue, in our opinion, is that injury history. He's got, a couple of ACLs in there. And, we're wondering how the medical is going to show up. Obviously, we won't have access to that, but, we're not sure he's a first-round pick. Maybe because of that, guys aren't going to be sure. He's had that history. Been fine the last couple of years. And, he had 2 really good seasons in a row, which he needed to have in order to be in this conversation. So we'll see. It's going to be interesting to see where he goes. Bo Nix has some similarities, to that. The injury factor wasn't there, but, hot and cold quarterback. And Pennock, to a degree, is the same guy. But there's a lot of talent there. There's a lot of skill there, and it's going to be interesting. There's some quarterbacks down the line that, I wouldn't, sniff at just because they might not have the athletic, the absolute traits and, and things like that, too, that might be in the mix. Somebody's going to take as a potential backup that could develop into their starter eventually. Brock Purdy and Aiden O'Connell are pretty good examples of guys that didn't fit the mold and end up being able to show that they could play in an NFL offense and be successful.
John, you said you were a former college coach, and so it brings me to an example. I was at a Baylor Pro Day, and I won't tell what position room it was, but I was in a pro day, and the coaches actually allowed me. Gil Brandt was still alive, the great Hall of Famer. He said, you need to come into one of these and listen to what is asked and how the coaches respond. And all these other coaches and scouts, pro scouts, were there peppering the coach, not in a negative way, but asking about a player, attitude, injury, motor, all of that. And he never blinked. It was, and basically even maybe some things that I would have known. How important is it for that college coach to make sure he doesn't protect his player, he's true about who he actually is and yet also he's representing that player?
Well, I think you have to be honest. You know, if a guy's got negatives, you know, they've got to come out. You know, you can't lie because, you know, if you want to be able to promote a player that's really good down the road, you know, you can't soft solve something. You know, I'll give you a good example of that. You know, years ago when I was, you know, doing some part-time stuff, and there was a corner out of UCLA, and I don't mention his name, who we had some guys that I knew in the NFL had some questions about and wanted to see if I would do some snooping. Found out from the coach that I knew that the guy was a coward. Flat out, he's a coward. And so, you know, and that in a nutshell kind of tells you what you need to know. He was brutally and, you know, bluntly honest. Now, the guy did get drafted and played in the league for several years, but he had to, you know, bounce around and change positions and things like that. Tremendously talented individual. But he wasn't going to be a standout, the guy that you're going to pick in the first round or anything like that. So he was like a fourth-round pick, fourth or fifth round. And the team that took him, it was kind of the last corner on the board, you know, that they felt had the athleticism that they wanted. It was a kind of a down year for corners. So, you know, that kind of thing is important. I think a coach needs to be honest. He can't soft soap it.
John, thank you, man. Appreciate it. Great stuff today, as always. Glad we had you on, as always. John Cooper, again, with Ourlads Guide to the NFL Draft. Baylor has now made it official.